Oh. So this PPT is visible for all of you, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
జనార్దన్ రావు గారు అందరినీ మ్యూట్ చేయండి సార్. స్పీకర్ తప్ప అందరినీ మ్యూట్ చేయండి. అది వాయిస్ వస్తా ఉంది.
Okay. So basically this program which we are talking about is to understand how much and what is the importance of accounting standard for small and medium companies and small and medium enterprises. When we are saying small and medium companies, majority of the private limited companies which we are auditing will be covered by small and medium enterprise, medium company classification. As rightly pointed out by Prasanna Kumar sir, level 1 enterprises are covered as non-small and medium companies where their net worth is more than, turnover is more than 50 crore, their borrowings are more than 10 crore. So this is the basic which we are normally having as far as the non-small and medium companies is concerned. Similar rule has been brought in for non-corporate entities as well. If the entity's turnover is more than 50 crore or their borrowings is more than 10 crore, then they are covered as a level 1 enterprise where entire accounting standards will be applicable. In respect of other categories, the accounting standards are applicable based on certain principles which we are going to discuss. As majority of us are also dealing with tax audit, our normal question which we will be having is whether really accounting standards has to be complied with when we carry out our audit of client under 44AB of the Income Tax Act, or maybe because we are doing an audit of certain companies where certain entities coming under presumptive taxation, 44AD, 44AE. In those cases, whether the accounting standard compliance is mandatory or not mandatory is the question mark which we are having. So the entire discussion will be focusing on small and medium enterprises, small and medium companies. That's what I wanted to say. And in the process, we will also discuss about the application of accounting standards for tax audits. That's what we are planning to have that. Depending upon the time which is available, we will also spend some time on specific standards. Otherwise, we will have the general discussion, including what would be the implication arising out of your compliance with the accounting standard, non-compliance with the accounting standard, whether it has to be considered as part of requirement relating to audit report, whether the audit report requires a change.
జాయిన్ చేయించాలి సిఏలు వాళ్ళు మెసేజ్ పెడుతున్నారు జూమ్ లో. వాడు మెసేజ్ పెట్టాడనే ఫోన్ చేసి ఇంకోటి మెసేజ్ పెట్టాడు హాయరా అని.
Sir, speaker got muted, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are muted also. I'm also get muted. I now opened it. So this is what the focus for today. Within the next 1 hour 15 minutes, we will try to cover as much as possible in a practical scenario. We will not get into too technical, but how practically we can apply in our practice of serving small and medium enterprises. That's what we will try to cover in the next 1 hour or so. And I can also take your questions, and you can post your questions in the chat box as suggested by the organizers of this session. If you go into the definition of an audit, the audit definition is not distinguishing anything, whether the entity is a bigger entity, its a size is larger size or smaller size. It is not differentiating between it's a profit oriented or it's a charitable organization. It is not talking about whether it is a private limited company, public limited company, listed company, or a partnership or a proprietary firm. It is not worried about anything. What the audit is always looking for is audit is an audit. And accordingly, it believes that there should be an independent examination of the financial statement of any entity, that any entity's activities of the entity, profit motive, non-for-profit motive, size, small company, small partnership, small proprietary unit, legal structure, is it a company or a non-corporate entity, is not at all a consideration when we are doing this audit, especially to express an opinion based on the audit we have conducted. So that is very important for us to understand why we have to worry about the accounting standard. Because audit remaining to be an audit, whether it's a small entity or a bigger entity. Audit remaining to be the same, whether you are auditing a partnership firm or you are auditing a listed company. Audit remaining to be the same, whether you are auditing an entity which is profit motive or doing trading activity, industrial activity, or manufacturing activity, or it is having only a charitable activity. So audit remaining the same, audit procedures remaining the same, expectation of the auditors also remaining the same. In those scenarios, the regulatory framework, whatever we are talking about with respect to company, the company's audit as well as the code of conduct, or the listed entities, companies audit, SEBI, Securities Exchange Board of India, and the code of conduct of institute, or in respect of non-corporate entities, what type of audit, under which law you are doing the audit. The audit has been made mandatory based on which law. That is actually giving the regulatory framework with respect to the applicability of the accounting standard. And ICAI code of conduct comes in all the cases. You have to necessarily follow the code of conduct. When I am saying this, let me also quickly review this requirement of peer review. In the peer review, the statement of peer review says that a practicing unit, including a practicing unit which is doing an audit of tax audit alone, not even necessarily that you have to do an audit of a company, but even if you're doing a tax audit and your firm has been peer reviewed, the peer reviewer is supposed to select samples of your tax audit and see how the audit has been conducted. This is one of the basic requirement for a peer review. And peer review says when the peer reviewers are reviewing your assignments or your client work, they will look into how much you are complied with the technical standard issued by the institute. And what is the quality of the audit report which you have issued? So quality of the audit report is even Form 3CB under 44AB audit or Form 3CA under 44AB audit, as well as any audit which has been conducted under the Companies Act. What is the quality of the audit report? When the quality of the audit report and compliance with the technical standard, what exactly is looked for is whether the entity has complied with the requirement of the accounting standard. If it is not complied with the accounting standard, whether the deviation is material. If the deviation is material, whether the auditor has considered in giving a modified opinion or a qualified opinion. So that exactly is what the peer review board is looking into. And of course, it also says guidance note on certain matters where there is no accounting standard. But fortunately, in our discussion today, we are not going to discuss about the guidance note. Similarly, when you are executing your work, you are expected to carry out your audit in accordance with standards on auditing, what we call it as an auditing and assurance standard board, which has issued the standards on auditing. These are all the guidelines which is basically done by peer review. And when you are looking into the peer review's major observation, they are always observing that majority of the practice units have never reported non-compliance with the accounting standard, or they have not reported relating to non-disclosure which is required as per the accounting standard, but that is not actually qualified by the practicing unit. And of course, you know pretty well, when we are doing an audit of a client, the client never wants a qualification. Whenever there is something which we have identified, the client will be either interested in passing the entry and so that the qualification will not come. And in case if they are not interested in passing the entry for some obvious reasons, they are trying to find out whether any other option is available other than qualification. Sometimes we can find out an alternative option. within the four walls of law. But in some cases, it is not possible. In that case, we have been compelled to qualify. But what has been observed is that even in a case where there is a requirement to qualify your audit report, the practicing units have never looked into that aspect at all. And accordingly, the non-compliance is not reported by the practicing unit. That is, an auditor's office, auditor's report is not having that type of closure. That is a major qualification which came, which is directly connected with the accounting standard. And of course, it also talks about quality of the audit report, judgments which has been done, the adequacy of the audit documentation. So those adequacy of audit documentation, etc., is based on the standards on auditing. So we are restricting our discussion only on our accounting standard today. Now, if you see the preface to the accounting standard, this is actually gives a guidance relating to whether accounting standards are applicable or accounting standards are not applicable. So this particular slide, I will spend a little bit of time so that you can understand whether you are in your audit of a non-corporate entity or audit of a small and medium enterprise or audit of a small and medium company, whether you have to comply with the requirement of accounting standard. And of course, when I am using the word you have to comply with the requirement of accounting standard, meaning the client has to comply with the accounting standard. If they are not complied with the accounting standard, what is the responsibility of the auditors? The reason is preparation and presentation of financial statements are the responsibility of the management, and we are only expressing an opinion on that. Okay, and to that extent, it is always required to look into that particular aspect. Let me see this principle, which is given by the preface to the accounting standard. Before you decide whether an accounting standard is applicable or not, the first and foremost is what is the basic principles relating to compliance with the accounting standard. What it says is that the first question you are supposed to ask is whether the entity is carrying on any business, industrial, or commercial activity. When I'm saying business, it may be even a trading entity. For a trading entity, purchase and sale is happening, it is doing a business activity. Industrial activity, I engage in manufacturing of product and then selling the product, industrial activity. And commercial activity, I may not be doing any business work or I'm not doing any industrial activity. I may be doing a service work. Maybe I may be even acting as an agent for a principal. So in those scenarios, business, industrial or commercial activity, if I'm carrying on, then only I have to worry about an accounting standard compliance. Suppose if I'm saying my client is not carrying on any business, any industrial activity, any commercial activity. For example, my client is a not-for-profit organization. It's a charitable organization. When the client is a charitable organization, they are not carrying on business activity. They are not carrying on industrial activity. They are not carrying on commercial activity. Whether accounting standards are applicable to that particular client is the question mark which we are having. That if you see that there is no business activity, industrial activity and commercial activity, if we conclude no accounting standards are applicable to that particular entity. So accordingly, you can simply say, I checked the first question, my client is not doing any business activity, industrial activity or commercial activity. They are simply taking donations and applying that for charitable organization, and accordingly, it is not applicable. So if you answer this question, yes, they do not have anything, then accounting standards are not at all applicable. You can follow whatever client is following and only ensure that the proper accrual accounting has been properly done. Whatever is the section under which you are doing the audit, for example, when you are doing an audit under 12AA or you are issuing a report under section 10. So what is the requirement under that particular section and what the form is requiring, that itself is enough. You need not even worry about the accounting standard. But let us take a small change. Suppose if the charitable organization also carrying on a small activity, like a majority of the charitable institution will also do this, right? What they do, their inmates, for example, destitute children, or maybe old age people, or physically challenged or mentally challenged. They have been engaged in certain activities. Some of the institutions even prepare greeting cards. Some of them are into printing books, etc. Those are sold in the market to raise funds for the activities of the charitable organization. Then the question is different. The question is saying, do you do any business activity, any industrial activity, any commercial activity? What you are trying to say, as a trust, 95% of my activity is raising donations and applying in charitable activity. But 5% I am also doing certain commercial activity like printing greeting cards, selling it, or printing certain books and selling it, or doing certain small job work, preparing some craft work, and which is being marketed to ensure my inmates are properly equipped with cope up with the requirement on a go forward basis. Even the smallest proportion of the activities of an organization is business, industrial, or commercial. 95% is charitable, 5% is some business activity. In that case, the first question says you should apply for the entire operations all the accounting standard. 5% is non-commercial activity, 95% is non-commercial activity, but still, because you are carrying on a proportion of a minor activity as business activity, you should think about application of accounting standard, because the first question is answered correctly, or it is said, yes, I am carrying on. Fortunately, the question is not stopped at level. It is actually asking one more question. What is saying that the financial statement which you are preparing, is it a general purpose financial statement, or it is for own consumption? For example, if I prepare a financial statement for an organization, that is only for the purposes of understanding whether the partner is, what is the profit which each partner has to arrive at. Or when I prepare a financial statement for a proprietary unit, I just wanted to prepare this to identify what is my profit for the year. And my tax limits, taxable limits, or my income is below the taxable limit. So I need not even file any income tax return. Okay. In those scenarios, it is called whether you prepare a general purpose financial statement or you are preparing a specific financial statement for your own internal consumption. If I say I prepare only special purpose financial statement, accounting standards are not applicable, even if you are carrying on business, industrial, or commercial activity. Now the question comes is, when these financial statements are prepared for filing along with the income tax return, whether it's a general purpose financial statement, the preface to the accounting standard says, yes, it's a general purpose financial statement, because the department relies on that. Okay, I answered both the question positively. One is I am carrying on business, industrial, or commercial activity, and the general purpose financial statements are prepared for filing with the income tax department. Whether accounting standards are mandatory. It asks the third question, whether the client is subjected to audit under any law. Please understand, audit under any law. Any law includes income tax law also. So suppose if I'm saying, no, it is not subjected to any audit, even under income tax law, no tax audit is applicable, then compliance with the accounting standard is not applicable to your client. So if all the questions have been answered positively, then accounting standards are applicable to your client. Otherwise, for a small and medium enterprise, you need not worry about compliance with the accounting standard at all. Okay, now we have talked about small and medium enterprise. That means non-corporate entities. They are covered under accounting standard only if they are subjected to audit under any law. They prepare a general purpose financial statement, and the general purpose financial statement in accordance with the requirement of in accordance with the requirement of a business, commercial, or industrial activity. Then only for a non-corporate entities it is applicable. Now, one of the questions which is coming to our mind, when auditor under any law, so tax audit is the auditor under Income Tax Act. 44AB is the provision which is bringing in the audit requirement. In 44AB, we actually have two different sections, right? One, where the turnover or gross receipts of the entity is beyond a threshold limit, we have a compulsory audit or tax audit which we are doing. Another case is a question which has come from Rajendra Prasad sir. Applicability of accounting standard in case of assessees following presumptive taxation, like section 44 AD, etc. When the sales turnover is more than 1 crore. The moment you are more than 1 crore, automatically tax audit will come. But when you are talking about a case where the 44 AD or 44 AE, there is a percentage of income you have to mandatorily apply in case if you don't want it to have it audited. For example, if the client is doing a retail trading, then what we say is 8% of, if I'm not wrong, 8% is the correct one, right? 8% of the turnover should be your total income. If that is not there, then necessarily below that percentage, you are necessarily has to get your accounts audited. So if you are getting your accounts audited because you are not offering the income as per the presumptive taxation 44 AD or 44 AE, you will again come back to 44 AB for getting the accounts audited. In that case also, you have to comply with the accounting standard. You cannot say, I will not comply with the accounting standard because my turnover or the gross receipts is not beyond the threshold limit for tax audit purposes. Whereas here we are saying below the taxable limit or below the particular percentage which has been defined, if I am offering income lower than that, I have to necessarily get my accounts audited. The moment I am saying it is necessarily has to be audited, I am getting audited under any law. The third condition is fulfilled. And I am preparing a financial statement which is being filed with the Income Tax Department. That is also fulfilled. And the entity is actually carrying on some business activity or commercial activity or industrial activity. Because of that only that turnover is coming in. So that is also fulfilled. So if you are doing a presumptive taxation, you have to see whether you are offering according to the percentage required in that particular section. Then no audit is required, no accounting standard is required. If you are not doing that, then you have to comply with all the applicable accounting standard. That is what the answer for what Rajendra Kumar sir has asked. Whether in case of presumptive taxation, accounting standard will apply. In respect of presumptive taxation, the accounting standard will apply if it is subjected to audit. That is where you are offering income less than the threshold limit given in that particular presumptive taxation regime. Okay. And coming to the next question, we do a lot of work for small and medium enterprises. We also do a lot of work for small and medium companies. Now, before I go into this, let me just talk about a little more on this. Small and medium enterprises, when we said it is a non-corporate entity. In non-corporate entity, we said only if all the three conditions are satisfied, we have to comply with the accounting standard. Suppose if I'm saying, no, it is not a non-corporate entity. It is a small private limited company, small and medium company. Very small turnover, very small borrowing. Borrowing is also not there. And paid up capital is also very small. In the case, whether for the small company, all the applicable accounting standards should be complied with or not. For this, the answer is yes, because we are not even going into this particular aspect, because in Companies Act, Section 133 of the Companies Act says all the company has to comply with their applicable accounting standard. They are talking about only two principles. One is accounting standard as per Companies Accounting Standard Rules 2006 or Companies Accounting Standard Rules 2015. The Companies Accounting Standard Rules 2015, for the time being, we will ignore it because it is for a listed entity or a very big company like where the net worth is more than 250 crore, where that says Ind AS should be applied. Ind AS is a complex accounting standard for a bigger company, listed company and unlisted company having net worth of more than 250 crore. So majority of the client which we will be dealing will be less than the 250 crore net worth, not turnover, net worth, share capital plus reserves and surplus. Even in the reserves and surplus, they are saying your revaluation reserve should be excluded. So 99.99% of the clients which we are auditing will not come if they are unlisted within the near to that threshold limit. And accordingly, Ind AS is, we are not worried about that. For other companies, less than 250 crore net worth, maybe just paid up share capital of 1 lakh rupees and accumulated balance in profit and loss account is, say, for example, 75,000 rupees. Entire net worth is only 1,75,000 rupees. For that small company, whether the accounting standard should be applied? The answer is yes, because Section 133 of the Companies Act made it mandatory that all the companies should comply with the accounting standards notified under that particular section. So accordingly, if you ask me small and medium enterprises, I will ask you to ask these 3 questions. Only if all the 3 questions have been answered in the affirmative, the standards are applicable. When we are talking about small and medium companies, we will say that accounting standards will always be applicable because they are notified under the Companies Act 2013. Okay. So small and medium companies, some small and medium enterprises, 2 different applicable conditions we have checked. Now, we are not only doing audit, right? We do a lot of other work for our client. So what is the situation for the other activity which we are doing? For example, we are talking about a certification. Prasanna Kumar sir was mentioning about net worth certification. When the client comes in, how we can give a certification of the net worth. Net worth of a client as per the audited financial statement, there is no problem for us to give. But net worth of an individual, how I can give a certificate? That's what Prasanna Kumar sir was mentioning. So we may not be able to value the property unless we got that somebody has valued it, and that is based on which we have taken that. That's the reason why we are little worried about giving a certificate on the net worth of an individual, net worth of a group. Okay. But if you are talking about any certificate, for example, export certificate or a certificate for making a small foreign currency remittance, or a certificate to say whether you are falling under small and medium enterprises definition. In all these cases, there is a certification which auditors are giving. Whether that certification work requires compliance with the accounting standard, the answer is no, because it's not an audit. You are actually verifying the facts and saying whether the facts are correct or not. So nothing to do with the accounting standard at all, except only one situation. If you are giving a net worth of an entity based on the audited financial statement, and assuming that the auditor is not you, I'm just giving an example, the auditor is not you, somebody has audited the financial statement of the company and they are asking for a certificate from you to say what is the net worth. When you are seeing the audit report of the other auditor, you are seeing that the auditor has qualified the audit report because certain accounting standards are non-complied with. For example, a provision for employee benefit is not made as per accounting standard 15. Just to take a very, very crude example. Because of that, the auditor has qualified. So if that provision has been made, what will happen? Your profit might have come down. If the profit comes down, what is the amount transferred to the net worth? Reserves and surplus is also less. To that extent, the net worth will also be impacted. So if you are giving a certificate of net worth for an entity which was audited based on the audited financial statement, you have to necessarily look into whether there is any qualification given in the audit report for non-compliance with the accounting standard. To that extent, you have to keep that also as part of the qualification here. Okay, that is the only scenario where I believe that the accounting standard should also be applied. The second scenario is, majority of the cases clients are coming and asking us, sir, I have applied for working capital expansion or a term loan I have applied from the bank, and the bank is asked the balance sheet. So I have given the financial statement which you have given for filing the income tax return. So the balance sheet and P&L has been given, but the bank is asking that to be signed by an auditor. So since you have filed my income tax return, please sign this and give it to me. When they are coming to us, some of us used to have the practice of saying, putting our seal, simply initialing it and giving to them. Or if full signature is asked, we put the round seal, put the initial and full seal, extracted from the books of accounts produced to us, or from the books of accounts produced to us, and we sign. And it's being accepted by the bank. As long as the client is doing properly and there is no issue, nobody is going to ask us. Assuming that you have given it good faith a report, or you are signed and gave the financial statement, unfortunately, because of certain issues, say for example, in COVID-19 situation, client business was very bad and they are not able to make the payment and they are not able to come back. And because of that, the account become bad. You know pretty well, whenever account becoming bad, the first person who has been questioned is not the client, the auditor. You have given the audit report, audited financial statement, based on which I have given the loan, and you have not carried out your duty, and I have been suffering because of that. Bankers are now taking the auditors also in a court, or when they are filing a complaint about a non-performing asset, they are putting auditor also one of the party as an accused, right? In FIR, it is actually included. So why that comes in? Because the bank simply says, you have put your round seal, you have said that it is from the books of accounts produced to you, so you have audited. Unfortunately, by putting the seal and putting extracted from the books of accounts, we are not actually doing audit. We are actually doing a compilation work, preparing that in a readable format. Instead of trial balance, we have put it in a balance sheet and profit and loss account. For compilation, audit report should be a different audit report. It says compilation report. But since you are not given anything, you are leaving the other person to consider that it's an audited financial statement. And accordingly, for compilation, there is no audit required. Because of that, accounting standards not required. But if you are simply putting your seal, you may be giving a assumption to the other person that you have done the audit. Be careful when you are giving such a type of report. There is a separate standards on auditing which says compilation of work, and their format has been given. And in fact, this format is available if you are going to the institute website and download from the auditing and assurance standard on other assurance engagement, standards on other assurance engagement. You can actually have 3400 is the number of the standard, which gives a format of report. That one-page format has to be added along with your financial statement, where it will clearly say that we have not carried out any audit, and accordingly, this is not an audit report. This is only a compilation report. Be careful about that, because Prasanna sir was also mentioning about provisional financial statement being signed by the auditor and getting into problem. Compilation is another area. Without knowing that, we are putting seal and we are get caught. Be little careful. SAE 3400 is what you have to take into consideration. Limited review is actually for listed companies and not for other companies. So for the time being, I am not discussing that, for keeping more time for other areas of discussion. Agreed upon procedure. For example, client is asking you to help in physical verification of fixed asset, reconciling that with the books of accounts. It is specifically to take a physical verification, tally it with the books of accounts. Or debtors accounts, they wanted to tally with the outstanding balances. They wanted to tally the GSTR balances with the GSTR return and the turnover. These are all you are doing as a specific work for the client. Whether that for the specific client compliance with the accounting standard is required, again, agreed upon procedure is not an audit, and accordingly it is not applicable. But if you are doing an audit under GST Act, whether it is an audit, yes, it is carrying on business or profession, and the general purpose financial statements are filed with the GST department, and it is subjected to audit under GST Act. So compliance with the accounting standard is really mandatory there also. For banks, we do a lot of things, right? we may be doing stock audit, we may be doing inspection audit, we may be doing a revenue audit, revenue leakage verification, etc. In all those scenarios, we are whether we are supposed to comply with the standards, accounting standard. No, because no financial statement has been prepared. This is a stock audit, and you are only verifying whether the stock are really existing, stock are really having the value, and the drawing power as given to the banker is matching with that. That's what we are doing, and accordingly, no application of accounting standards will come into the picture. Maybe forensic audit is not all of us are doing, so I'm just skipping it. Audit of NPO, I have already told, even a small proportion of the total income arising out of trading activity or any business activity like publishing of books, manufacturing of handicrafts and selling it, or maybe some sort of any other activity which you are doing, commercial activity you are doing, certain services which you are doing. For example, some of them are using the inmates to do some cleaning activity or watch and ward activity. Even smallest income is coming out of that. A not-for-profit organization should fully comply with the accounting standard for the entire income. Even for the donation, they have to comply with the accounting standards, not necessarily only for the proportion where the business income is coming in. No, for the entire activity, accounting standards are applicable. This is to understand what is the level of requirement as far as standards are concerned for a non-corporate entity. Okay. Now let us understand this tax audit and the accounting standard. As we have said, in tax audit, whether accounting standards are applicable or not, we are having a feeling that it's not applicable. But based on the preface to the accounting standard, business activity, commercial activity or industrial activity is being carried out. General purpose financial statement for filing with the income tax department is being done, and it is subjected to audit under 44AB of the Income Tax Act. Definitely all the standards are applicable for a tax audit. So 95% of us will be doing tax audit, and we will have at least 1 or 2 tax audit clients. For those clients, they have to ensure that the accounting standards have been complied with without any deviation. First part. The second part of the question which normally comes in is that Income Tax Act comes out with the Income Computation and Disclosure Standard, ICDS. Anyway, in tax audit also, as part of class 13, I'm talking about whether the Income Computation and Disclosure Standard has been complied with the client or not, assessee or not. So accordingly, that has been already covered. Why should I cover one more set of audit? Please understand, Income Computation and Disclosure Standard is only for computing your business income or only for computing your income from other sources as per the Income Tax Act. It is only for computing your income. Whereas accounting, preparation of the financial statement, etc. is based on the accounting standards, and accordingly, you have to comply with all the accounting standard. When I'm saying you, your client has to comply with all the accounting standard in the preparation of the financial statement. And when we are doing the audit, if there is non-compliance, we have to report it in the audit report. That is what required. So the Income Computation and Disclosure Standard alone is not enough for tax audit. All other applicable accounting standards should also be complied with. Prasanna sir was also mentioning, we have to come with one more set of accounting standard, right? So as far as we are concerned, there are 3 sets of accounting standard as of now. For non-corporate entities, the standards are issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And there are small differences between that and the accounting standard which are applicable to companies as per Companies Accounting Standard Rules 2006. There are some differences. And there are certain companies which are very big, listed companies, proposed listed companies are having a turnover of, net worth of 250 crore or more, very big in size. For them, Ind AS is applicable. Ind AS is applicable for listed companies and bigger companies. But our discussion for today's topic will run around only these 2 categories, that is the non-corporate entities and general companies. So we will be discussing only standards issued by the institute, and the company's accounting standard rules 2006, because these are applicable for small and medium companies and small and medium enterprise. When we use the word enterprise, non-corporate entity. When we are using company, it is under the Companies Act. Okay. This we are not going to discuss today. We are not going to discuss for this. Now, what is the conceptual difference between companies' accounting standard rules and the non-corporate entity standard? Who has issued or who has notified is different. Here it is issued by ICAI, whereas it is issued by the Companies Act. Okay. The Companies Act actually has issued the standards for the companies who has to apply. So as you see, this is applicable for non-corporate entities, this is applicable for companies. That is also clear. And what it says is that for the purposes of seeing whether all the accounting standards are applicable or certain accounting standard exemption can be given, they are classifying this non-corporate entity into three categories: level 1 enterprise, level 2 enterprise, and level 3 enterprise. Level 1 enterprise is very big non-corporate entities who are having 50 crore and above turnover, 10 crore and above borrowed funds. So if this category is not there, turnover is less than 50 crore but more than 1 crore, borrowing is less than 10 crore but more than 1 crore, they are covered as level 2 enterprises. This will be a medium-sized companies where tax audit will be applicable. For them, compliance with the accounting standard has to be necessarily followed. And the third category is less than 1 crore turnover and less than 1 crore borrowing. When we are talking about this borrowing level, automatically what happens is that, these companies are considered as a level 3 enterprises for which there is no requirement for tax audit. If it is a proprietary unit or a partnership unit, you are not going to do any tax audit unless it is under presumptive taxation. In those situations, you will be applying the standards. In the third category, there is no standards which are required to be applied because you are not auditing under any law. But the level 1 and level 2 of the non-corporate entities should follow with all the applicable accounting standards issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. This is for non-corporate entities. When it comes to the companies, here the companies are classified into small and medium companies, SMC, and non-SMC. So they have classified into two categories, whether it's a small and medium company or non-small and medium companies. For small and medium companies, there are exemptions for certain accounting standards. For example, cash flow statement need not be prepared for a small and medium company. Segment reporting is not required to be prepared by a small and medium company. All other accounting standards will be applicable, including related party transaction for small and medium company. Non-small and medium company, all the accounting standards will be applicable. Even when you are seeing whether there is any exemption which is available, if you see, it's only talking about relaxation is for disclosure. Relaxation is only for disclosure and not for measurement. So the recognition and measurement is not exempted. All what is exempted is only a disclosure, even for small and medium enterprises. But coming to our question of applicability of accounting standard for non-corporate entities, you can simply ignore level 3 entities because they are not subjected to audit even under the Income Tax Act. Okay, so for them, no accounting standard is required. So with this, you may have a very big relief. If I have 100 clients, out of which 20 clients may be tax audit clients, balance 80 clients are non-tax audit clients. They are not companies. So for 80 clients, no compliance with accounting standard is required. For the balance 20 companies, because it is tax audit, comes under level 2, you have to apply the accounting standards. That is for non-corporate entities. When it comes to small and medium enterprises, majority of our company clients will be small and medium companies. And those cases, you can apply only those applicable accounting standards, which we will see little later. For example, in this, I am giving the numbers of the accounting standard itself, which will be applicable for small and medium companies and small and non-small and medium companies. So if you see non-small and medium companies, all the applicable accounting standards, all standards are applicable. This is also applicable. This is also applicable. Whereas if you see small and medium companies, only the first category is applicable. Second category, cash flow statement, not applicable. AS3, AS17, segment reporting, not applicable. Consolidation, we never prepare for small and medium companies because they may not be having any subsidiary, associate or joint venture. So it may not be applicable. So we are more worried about application of accounting standards under Companies Accounting Standard Rules 2006 with respect to non-small and medium companies. For small and medium companies, we can say that we are complied with the accounting standard to the level up to which it is applicable. Let's see what type of relaxation is given. Relaxation is, as I have already discussed, only on disclosure, not on principle and measurement. Another point which I wanted to tell you is that if it is a small and medium company also, AS18 is for related party transaction. For RPT, it's a mandatory accounting standard. I come across a situation where the registrar of companies has sent a notice to an audit firm saying that the client has not reported related party transaction, and you have certified that the financial statements are in compliance with the accounting standard prescribed under section 133, and to that extent it is an incorrect statement. Why your audit report is not qualified? Because you are not qualified, why can't we proceed with penal proceedings against you for non-compliance with section 143 subsection 3 of the Companies Act. 143 subsection 3 of the Companies Act says the auditor has to confirm certain matters. One of the matters is whether the balance sheet, profit and loss account, cash flow statement, if applicable, and the notes and accounts are in agreement with the accounting standard, have been prepared in accordance with the accounting standard prescribed under section 133 of the Act. So because they are not complied with the accounting standard, the client has not complied with the accounting standard, but you have not reported on that, to that extent you are not in compliance with section 143 subsection 3. Your reporting requirement you are not done properly. Why can't we proceed with penalty proceedings on you? Show cause notice has been issued to an auditor. And accordingly, be careful that related party transaction is applicable even for a small and medium company. Okay. Now, when we are talking about non-corporate entity, what we have seen is previously is a company. Now we are saying 80% of the clients are non-corporate entities. Out of this 80%, Rajendra Prasad sir has asked, what is the applicability of accounting standard in case of level 3 entities as per ICAI? What happens is, in a level 3 enterprises, they are not subjected to audit in a non-corporate entity. If it is a company, then it will be okay, but it's a non-corporate entity. In this case, what will happen is we may not be having applicable audit under any law. So the third condition for applicability of the accounting standard may not be met. And accordingly, I felt that the level 3 enterprises accounting standards will not be applicable for a non-corporate entity. But if you are saying it's a small and medium company, under the Companies Act, accounting standard anyway will be applicable. I'm talking about non-corporate entity. I will explain here. If you see that this accounting standard, which we are talking about as per the Companies Accounting Standard Rules, what is happening is you have level 1, level 2, and level 3. In a level 3 category is what he has asked me that question. In a level 3 category, what will happen, even though all the accounting standards are applicable, AS1 to AS14, 15, 16, 19, everything is applicable. What will happen is these are NCA, non-corporate entities, but not audited. So if they are not audited, there is no requirement for compliance with the accounting standard. That's what the preface says. And accordingly, majority of the clients who are falling under level 3 categories are not subjected to audit under any law, and to that extent, accounting standards will not be applicable to them. Okay. Suppose if applicable, accounting standards are applicable because you are doing an audit for this particular level 3 enterprise also. Maybe under 44 AD, the percentage of profits which you are supposed to show is not coming in. So mandatory accounting standard will be, mandatory audit under 44 AB will be there. In that case, level 3 will also get covered. Irrespective of the turnover, it gets covered. Then you have to find out applicability of the accounting standard. So all the accounting standard other than AS 3, 17, 18, 24, 21, 23, 27 is not applicable. All other standards are applicable even for level 3, provided it is subjected to audit. If it is not subjected to audit, it's not required. And another thing which they have given, for non-corporate entities which are falling under level 2 and level 3, only for level 2 and level 3, if the number of employees is less than 50, you normally ask for an actuarial valuation for gratuity and leave encashment. No, that is not required. You can simply do an actual liability basis, 15 divided by 26 in the number of year of service into last drawn salary. You can also make the provision in accordance with that. Only thing is, this type of exemption when you are applying, you have to disclose as part of the notes and accounts that the company is a small and medium enterprise, and to that extent it is falling under level 3. Only the applicable accounting standards and level 3 has been complied with. You have to make a disclosure with respect to that. This is for non-corporate entity. When we are talking about the applicability of the accounting standards, one of the questions which is coming to our mind is that where the accounting standards has to be, how we can manage this accounting standard. How actually I can manage this accounting standard. One question will normally come to our mind when we have to apply the accounting standard. How best we can manage this practically. The question is very simple. You have to simply have a, maybe I will suggest you to have a small checklist. That small checklist will only have 29 accounting standards, out of which 2 accounting standards are not there now. AS 8 and AS 6 is no more there. So that means it's only 27 accounting standard. Plot that accounting standard and check whether the accounting standard is applicable to your client. Sorry, whether the accounting standard is applicable to your client. If applicable, proceed further. If not applicable, stop at that level itself. Okay. Then you can say that this particular accounting standard is not applicable and accordingly I need not do. So for each of the standard, put one column whether it is applicable or not applicable. If you say yes, it is applicable, then this is my suggestion. Link that particular line item of the financial statement. For example, what is line item of financial statement? Property, plant and equipment is a line item of the property balance sheet. Sales is the line item of the profit and loss account. Find out whether this line item has to be linked with the particular accounting standard. For example, property, plant and equipment, we have a standard called AS10. AS10 is for property, plant and equipment, nothing but fixed asset. If I'm saying that I also have revenue in my books of accounts, we have a standard called AS9. So we will see what is the applicability of AS9. Okay, so you will link your financial statement line items with the particular accounting standard. Because you have linked it, you can also say what is the audit strategy to ensure the compliance. You can give this as a guidance for your client, for your audit team, what exactly you wanted to do with that particular item. Sales, how it has to be audited. Sales, how it has to be checked with the accounting standard. AS10, where on what basis you can capitalize a particular item as a property, plant and equipment. And what is the depreciation principle? Have you applied the economic useful life? Have you applied the residual value? Have you charged depreciation based on the straight line method or WDV method? have you made the disclosure according to AS 10? These are all the audit strategy which has to be checked. So one page accounting standard checklist prepared at the planning stage and ensuring that all these items have been checked as part of your audit process to ensure the numbers have been properly done. And finally, ensuring that the profit and loss account is in compliance with the presentation and disclosure requirement. Because each standard requires a disclosure to be made, and to that extent, whether the disclosures have been properly done or not. If you have this one-page checklist for where you have a planning stage plans and what you have actually executed, who has verified it, that will help you to ensure compliance of the accounting standard for small and medium enterprises as well as small and medium companies. Now, can you please explain about level 1 and level 2 parameters is being asked as one of the question. Sir, level 1 in respect of a non-corporate entity, it talks about whether the entity is having a turnover of more than 50 crore, whether it has a borrowing of more than 1 crore. If it is there, that is called level 1 enterprise. For level 1 enterprise, even if it is a non-corporate entity, all the applicable accounting standard has to be complied with mandatorily, no exception, no relaxation. Even in disclosure, no relaxation. What is level 2 enterprise? Level 2 enterprise, it will be having less than 50 crore turnover, but more than 10 crore turnover. That will get covered as part of this. And the borrowing, when we are taking 10 crore borrowing, it is actually considered as 1 crore borrowing. So that is called level 2. And for that level 2 enterprises, we will not have all the standards are applicable. Certain standards, they have given some relaxation in the disclosure part. That is what level 2 and level 3. Level 2, because turnover is more than the threshold limit of 1 crore and up to 50 crore, automatically that is covered under 44AB. Maybe in the next year, there could be a different scenario because the limit is going to be increased from 1 crore to 5 crore. So some of the level 2 enterprises will be still not falling under tax audit. But for the current year, 2020, if the turnover is more than 1 crore but less than 50 crore, that will be considered as level 2. And because it is turnover is more than 1 crore, 44AB audit is required. Because 44AB audit is required, they have to necessarily comply with all the applicable accounting standard. But there are some relaxation given because they are not level 1 enterprise. They are smaller there by entities or maybe medium-sized entities. They have given certain relaxation. That is what level 1 and level 2 are. Now, proceeding further on this, what we are supposed to try to understand is our audit report consideration. What do you mean by audit report consideration? In case if the entity has not complied with the accounting standard, the auditor has to qualify his audit report. When the auditor has to qualify his audit report, what is the basis of qualification? Whether for example, profit of the small and medium company is 10 lakhs and they are not accounted for leave encashment of 5,000. Whether I have to qualify that they are not complied with accounting standard 15? The answer is no, because they are giving certain guidance. Let us look into the guidance. The same guidance is applicable. I may be using the section of the Companies Act for the compliance. The same rule will be applicable for a non-corporate entity also, in case accounting standards are made mandatory. When it is made mandatory for non-corporate entities, to recap, if it is subjected to audit under any law. Okay, let's understand that. One thing is whether they have complied with the accounting standard as far as the principles are concerned. Accounting policy is the principle. The principle is for what? Principle is for recognition and principle is for measurement. So for recognition and measurement, I will be applying the accounting policy, whether the accounting policy which has been used, and of course, there are some disclosure which is also required as per the accounting policy. For example, disclosure of accounting policy itself is one of the requirements. Whether these three principles have been required to be followed, whether that has been followed. If I say it is as per the standard, if it is as per the standard, tick mark. So I need not worry anything. Under the Companies Act, there is a requirement 143 subsection 3, whether the financial statements are in compliance with the accounting standard. There I will say, yes, they are in agreement because the policy is as per the standard. If I say, no, the policy is not according to the standard, then I have to say that it is not in agreement with the requirement of section 143 subsection 3. But before that, I have to ask one more question. Whether the impact is material, like what I have said, where the provision for leave encashment is only 5,000 rupees, it's a very trivial amount. Whether we have to apply the accounting standard, the standard says if the amount is material, qualify. If it is not material, you need not do any qualification. You need not do anything with respect to that. That's what the standard says. In some terms, all the account standards are applicable only if they are material. Materiality is the driver for the accounting standard. If materiality, when I have considered it is not material to the financial statement, I need not worry about it. I can issue a clean audit report if it is not material. Even if the accounting policy adopted is not in compliance with the accounting standard, but the impact is not material. So I will not do any worry, because if it is material only, the user of the financial statement will change his view. Otherwise, he will not going to change. Then in that case, there is no requirement. Then the second item, when we are talking about accounting policy, this is basically risk, revenue recognition and measurement. The other side is I require to make certain disclosure. This is what we have said. There are certain disclosure which is required to be done. Whether those disclosure is in accordance with the standard. If I'm saying no, what will happen? If I say yes, positive statement. If I say no, whether disclosure is not going to affect my number, why should I worry about the disclosure? If you have the feeling, please understand SA 700. SA 700 is an audit report format, both for corporate entities and non-corporate entities, as per the standards on auditing. It says that your audit report requires a qualification as per SA 705. In case where the number which is reported is materially misstated, as well as it says if the disclosure is missed, the material disclosure is not made, in that case also it says that you have to consider that these financial statements are not properly complying with the accounting standard. Then you have to make a negative statement for non-disclosure as well. Like what we are saying here, for the amount also I will qualify if it is material. If the disclosure is a material disclosure but it is missed, then also I have to qualify. When we are asking about the negative statement, we are asking a question whether it's a violation of the legal requirement. If I say yes, I will qualify. Otherwise, I will say whether it is material. If it is material, and because of it is a material disclosure, true and fair view is affected, then I will qualify. Otherwise, I will not qualify. This is your audit report and the compliance with the accounting standard. Now we have talked about these sections under the Companies Act, right? Section 143.3. 143.3 requires auditor to specifically make 5 statements. One, whether you have received the information and explanation which are required for the purposes of your audit. You sought for the information and obtained. One. Second is whether the balance sheet, profit and loss account, statement of cash flows are in agreement with the books of accounts. Third, whether these financial statements are in accordance with the requirement of section 133, accounting standard prescribed under section 133. That the third is what exactly we are talking about under 143 subsection 3. Let us now ask another question. Suppose if it is a non-corporate entity, whether I have to worry about my audit report qualification on these parameters? Exactly, yes. Only thing is you are not covered by 143.3, but you are covered by accounting standard and code of conduct. If there is a deviation in the accounting standard, auditor should report that. That is what the requirement. And that requirement comes as per the standards on auditing, and the standards on auditing and accounting standards are mandatory for compliance with the practicing unit, that's the auditor's office, according to the code of conduct, even for a non-corporate entity. Okay. So the same logic will apply even for a non-corporate entity. Only thing is section is not applicable. Otherwise, you are covered by that. And I'm just trying to pick up some quick areas where we have to discuss about it, because another 10 minutes is what is there for 1:30 up to which we are going to discuss. I will only pick up certain items which are essential for the 2020 accounting period. And wherever you have any questions which has to be answered, please post your questions on the chat box. I will take finally questions for 5 to 10 minutes. In case if there are further questions you wanted to do it, my contact details will also be shared with the institute. You can actually call me at any point of time. One is you have to ensure accounting policy disclosure as per AS1, both for NCE, non-corporate entity, as well as companies. So companies as well as non-corporate entities, AS1 should be fully applicable. So you have to say how, what are all the accounting policy relating to various items which are covered. In non-corporate entities, I normally give a statement of accounting policies relating to items in the balance sheet of the client. So there will be fixed assets, there will be intangible assets, there will be inventory, there will be cash and cash equivalent, there will be revenue, there will be borrowings, and borrowing requires a borrowing cost. I will disclose about that, and I will disclose anything which is relating to in the P&L account, revenue, because AS9 is applicable, depreciation AS10 will be applicable, employee benefit AS15 will be applicable. So I will give the accounting policy relating to what is there in the balance sheet and P&L. The related accounting policy will be done for both this type of entity. Okay. One of the point which you have to specifically consider is whether going concern is affected with the COVID-19 situation. There is a material uncertainty whether the client will be able to continue his business even for the next 12 months. If you have that, whether the financial statement can be prepared as per going concern is the question mark which you consider that. There is one question which is coming in the chat box. I'm seeing something. You can continue for 10 more minutes. That's what the 1:30 also which we have talked about. So we will continue that level. Another important point is in the COVID-19 situation, please check that your net realizable value considerations are proper or not, because you might have considered the value based on the selling price existing as of 31st March, but subsequently 3 months because of the close down, you may not be able to sell it, and the stock selling price may be lower than what is the price. Then we can actually consider that as well. Okay. Rajendra Prasad is again asking the question, what is the GST input tax credit in the valuation of inventories as per AS2? In AS2, when you are valuing the inventory, AS2 says that purchase price and all taxes which are not refundable by the department. So when we are saying GST input credit is available, that is a refundable tax. So that will not get included for the valuation as per AS2. But having said that, we have an ICDS on inventory. ICDS on inventory says you have to take into consideration all taxes. So GST should be included for ICDS, not for AS2, not for AS2. That's what you have to consider as far as GST input credit is concerned. In the books, you will not add GST, but for ICDS purposes, you have to add it. But the technical guidance given by the institute says that even if you are using inclusive method, that is including GST or excluding GST, it is revenue neutral. And if you are following that method to report under your 44AB report, please reproduce the text which has been given. As per the technical guidance issued by the institute on tax audit, the inclusive method and exclusive method remaining to be revenue neutral, and accordingly no adjustment is required under section 145A capital A. This is one of the clause where institute has given the guidance. So accordingly you can give this answer. Similarly, when clause 13 is asking deviation between the accounting principle and ICDS, ICDS on inventory asks you to include it, but again the technical guidance refers back to the tax audit guidance. So you can, there also you can put that disclaimer and say it is not applicable. And AS5, when there is a change in accounting policy, you have to give the related disclosure. In case of AS7, if the entity is a real estate, they are in the construction contract, you have to apply completed contract method. Completed contract method is applicable as per ICDS in case if the contract duration itself is 90 days. But if it's more than 90 days, this says it should be percentage completion. And as per AS7, everything is percentage completion. So completed contract method is not applicable. So you have to be careful on that particular aspect as well. When we are talking about AS10, change in depreciation method is a change in accounting policy or it's a change in accounting estimate. Harish is asking that question. I'm coming to that. When we are talking about the AS10 with respect to depreciation, from straight line method to WDV method, whether it's a change in accounting policy or a change in accounting estimate. As per AS10, this has been revised. AS10 is revised now, you know pretty well. It was revised last year. As per AS10 revised, it is only a change in estimate and not change in accounting policy. And accordingly, whatever is the WDV, when you are changing the accounting policy, what is the remaining useful life, divide it by that number and charge it from the current year onwards. In simple terms, it is a prospective adjustment. Prospective adjustment. No retrospective recalculation of depreciation is required. This is from 2018 March. Before that, AS10 is not revised. From 2018 March, it is a change in accounting policy. It is a change in accounting estimate. In accounting estimate. So accordingly, you can follow only prospective adjustment. Okay. Now, in case of real estate transaction, what is the treatment of interest expenses for the valuation of WIP? Suppose if you are saying that the real estate development is happening, the interest on WIP, it is coming actually as per AS 16, which we will discuss little later. Maybe I will go to that AS 16. That will be part of your capitalization. So it is a qualifying asset, and to that extent you will capitalize that and show as part of your WIP. And having said that, the requirement of AS 16 as per the provisions of accounting standard and as per the provision of ICDS are different, because qualifying asset as per ICDS says it includes property, plant and equipment, furniture, fixture, office equipment, etc. and says only for inventory 12 months and above. Whereas AS 16 says any item which takes more than 12 months should be considered as a qualifying asset. So accordingly, there is a difference between ICDS and AS 16. When you are doing tax audit, be careful that you are complied with the qualifying asset requirement as per ICDS and to that extent you have quantified the impact, as well, as per clause 13 of the Form 3CD. One more question which is coming in: subsidy received against a loan taken for acquisition of fixed asset. Okay, what to do? Actually, AS 12 is talking about how to deal with the government grant. Any subsidy which you have taken for financial in respect of an asset has to be reduced from the cost of the asset, and only for the balance you are entitled for depreciation. That is very specific under the Income Tax Act also. In AS 12 also it says that you reduced from the specific asset. Suppose a group of assets have been acquired, then allocate that based on the cost of those assets, individual assets, and adjust with the assets. That is the method which normally being adopted there. AS 18, as I have mentioned, this is very, very important because it is applicable for all the entities according to the company's accounting standard rules. Even for small and medium companies, this is applicable. When it comes to a case of non-corporate entities, please be careful on two aspects. One is 40A to B. You have some disclosure, payment to related party. Ensure that you are reconciling with that particular item also. When you have given a loan to a director, section 185 of the Companies Act is talking about certain prohibited loans. In that case, be careful on that. Plus section 2, subsection 22E of the Income Tax Act relating to what we call as a deemed dividend. Be careful on that particular aspect also. Ensure that all these things have been complied with. Okay, sir, you are giving some more time for me to go ahead. So depending upon the questions, we will actually take into consideration whether we will have time required up to 140, because I have only 3 more slides to consider. Deferred tax accounting. My suggestion is always ensure the effective tax rates are tallied. What do you mean by effective tax rates are tallied? Current tax plus deferred tax divided by profit before tax should be equivalent to the applicable tax rate for the entity. That is what effective tax rate reconciliation. If that has been done, you can always be comfortable that your provision for tax is not wrong. That is one. And another is deferred tax asset in some cases cannot be created unless there is a convincing evidence. Convincing evidence is required. If it is not there, you cannot create deferred tax asset. You have to be little careful on that particular item. Coming to intangible asset, you have to actually see that normally in small and medium companies or small and medium enterprises, only computer software could be there. Otherwise, computer software, otherwise there is no intangible assets will be there. And computer software, you know what is the normal depreciation. Whatever is applicable rate for computer, you apply for book purposes as well as for the income tax purposes. It is not, if I'm not wrong, it's 40% can be applied. Okay. And there is a difference between computer software and any other amount. One more question: amount received from insurance company for damage or loss of fixed asset is one question. Another question is, Pradeep Kumar is asking the question, applicability of financial lease for non-corporate entities. First, I will answer the financial lease for non-corporate entities. We are having a standard called AS 19, which talks about leases. This AS 19 is applicable fully for non-corporate entities as well as for companies. For both, they are mandatory. So accordingly, when we are talking about AS 19, it talks about financial lease as well as operating lease. What do you mean by financial lease? I took the ownership of the asset and going to repay the principal as well as interest. That is what financial lease. Whereas the ownership of the asset is with the lessor, I'm only using that asset, and to that extent, I am paying rental every month. That is an operating lease. So accordingly, AS 19 financial lease will apply to non-corporate entities as well. Operating lease requirement will also apply to non-corporate entities. Only exemption which they have given is there is a requirement for straight lining the lease requirement. For example, first year I'm paying 100, say 1 lakh rupees as the lease rent. Second year, 10% increase is given, 1,10,000. Third year, another 10% is increase given. 3 years I have had a agreement period, lock-in period. Then I have to find out what is the straight line depreciation by straight line rent. Nothing but 1 lakh into 12, 1,10,000 into 12, 1,21,000 into 12. Add all that for the 36 months, divided by 36 is the per month charge. That per month charge should be charged right from the first year. Even though you pay only 1 lakh rupees, you have to charge right from the beginning. That rule is also applicable for non-corporate entities as well as companies. That is as per AS 19 is concerned. When we are coming to the next question, amount received from insurance companies for damage of fixed asset, the point is very, very clear that insurance claim received cannot be adjusted against the cost of the asset. It should be treated as other income, and the portion of the asset which is damaged should be debited to the P&L account because the asset is not in existence, right? And for the purposes of income tax, we will continue to charge depreciation in the same basis as per section 32 on block of asset basis. That is what we will try to do. That is the answer for loss insurance claim received on loss of fixed asset. GST input credit output liability and payment should charge to P&L account or it's a balance sheet item. As far as exclusive method is concerned, GST is not part of your turnover. GST collection is not part of your turnover. GST payment is not part of your expenditure. It is normally considered as a balance sheet item. Only where you say that my MRP includes GST in certain cases, can I readjust in the invoice itself showing what is the GST separately and base value separately, or otherwise in certain cases I have to show that as a gross sales and the GST should be paid out of my pocket. Then I charge it to my P&L as an expenditure. So it is depending upon what is the category. Normally it will be a balance sheet item. Very, very special categories, it will come to the P&L as a charge. Okay. When we are charging to P&L, that means it's a inclusive method. That is, we are including the GST in part of our income as well as part of our expenditure. Where we are saying, no, it is not part of my P&L account. It is actually a liability collected to be remitted to the government and I am holding it. And when I collect it, I am remitting it. So it is, the liability is, I'm only doing an, what you call a pass-through agent. And to that extent, it is not my asset as well as liability. It is not my income or liability or expenses. In that case, it is a balance sheet item. Normally, it will be a balance sheet item. Peculiar scenarios where you are not able to remove that from the turnover. In that case, it will be charged as a P&L item. In case of real estate transaction, registration of properties being done in the capacity as holder of general power of attorney. In some cases, what is the accounting treatment both for seller and buyer point of view? When you are actually entering into a general power of attorney, it is not considered as a purchase. Accordingly, you cannot bring that into the books of accounts. But having said that, under the Income Tax Act, the treatment is totally different. The moment you have given a power of attorney or you took the power of attorney from the point of view of the seller, you have given the control over the asset to the other party. So the capital gains is triggered on that particular date, right? That is what you have to consider in that. One of the client, Divagar is asking this question. One of the clients manufacturing goods and selling same through e-commerce portal, and another client buying goods from OEM selling through e-commerce portal. Turnover is within the limit. These clients can be classified as SME. Definitely, depending upon small and medium enterprises, because in both the cases, if the turnover is less than the threshold limit given, less than 1 crore rupees, then they will be considered as level 3 enterprises. Because SME, when we are saying, it should not be a company. So if the turnover is less than 1 crore, it will be level 3 enterprise. Suppose if it is more than 1 crore but less than 50 crore, still it will be SME because it's a level 2 enterprise. It can be classified. And coming to can non-corporate entity, Palam Manasadevi is asking this question. whether non-corporate entities follow WDV method as per the provisions of Income Tax Act 1961. This is because AS 10 on fixed assets is saying depreciation should be based on the asset at based on the useful life of the assets, and accordingly normally we go with useful life is 5 years, means straight line we will do, or WDV method we will arrive at. The question why Palam Manasa is asking this question is that under the Income Tax Act we are going with the WDV rates given by the Income Tax Section 32, right? So whatever is given under Section 32, we are using that particular rate. And accordingly, if I apply that particular rate, can I say that I am complying with AS 10? This is Section 32 of IT Act. So if I am using that rates, WDV rates, whether it will be equivalent to useful life as per AS 10. My view is you have to put your notes on accounts like that. What you have to say is that the economic useful life assessed by the entity is approximates to the economic useful life under the Income Tax Act, and accordingly the entity has used the WDV rates as provided by Section 32 of the Income Tax Act for the purposes of depreciation. You have to explain that as an accounting policy and the justification why you are feeling the useful life is also equivalent to that rate. Some of the proprietary units have used that, partnership cases they have used it, but we have asked them to use this additional explanation saying that the WDV rates given under the Income Tax Act approximates the useful life, and to that extent we can have that. Another question which is coming in is whether impact of COVID-19 needs to be disclosed separately in the financial statement as per AS 5 as exceptional item. Sir, first of all, you see whether this amount is very serious for many companies for 2020. 2020, it may not be serious. Only 7 days has impacted in that period, 24th to 31st. The impact may not be serious. But when you are seeing that whether the inventory which was finished goods can be saleable or not saleable, if the impact comes in severely, you can consider that item as part of your financial statement expenditure. You have to consider any provision required for a debtor based on subsequently the debtor's business has gone because of COVID-19 situation. All these items you can do. The question is whether it can be shown as an exceptional item or not is a debatable point. My view is that COVID-19 is not within the control of the entity. It is not going to be a recurring nature, and accordingly you are still allowed to have it as a exceptional item. It's my view, and the reason is the quantum will be, if you assess the quantum, it will be significant number. That is not going to occur in the next year. Maybe in the next year also it will continue for 21 March because 3 months already we have lost. Could be possible. But my view is you can show that as an exceptional item as per AS 5. Coming to the AS 18 and AS 29, impairment, my feeling is with the COVID-19 situation, you have to check whether impairment testing has to be done for clients who are having very strong capital investment in fixed asset and their projected sales for the next few years are getting dropped because of COVID-19 situation. Please consider that and make a provision. So COVID-19 is one important assessment which you have to see. As far as the AS 29 is concerned, only point which I wanted to check, tell you is that 43B comes under 44AB, one of the requirement to disclose any tax, duty or other sum payable to the government but not paid within the due date for filing the return as per section 139 subsection 1 of the Income Tax Act. In that case, you are supposed to disclose those items and disallow in computation of your business income. What happens is these items which we are showing as per part of our balance sheet and compared to 43B, there will be a situation of difference between these two. So ensure that that being reconciled. That is the one. India is, even though I have said not to be worried too much about that, only one caution. Suppose if India's is applicable to one entity, and that entity is the investor of your client. For example, if you are seeing the share capital, who are all the shareholders of the entity which you are auditing. Non-corporate entity is nothing to worry, because non-corporate entity Ind AS is not at all applicable. Even if the turnover is, even if the net worth is more than 250 crore, it is not applicable. For companies which are maybe small and medium company, please see that who are all the shareholders. If the shareholders are another company, check what is the percentage of shareholding that other company has. If it has more than 20%, ask a question whether that company prepares as per Ind AS. If the other company, let's say your investor, prepares under Ind AS, you should also prepare as per Ind AS. You cannot prepare as per AS, even for a smaller company, because the roadmap says holding, subsidiary, associate, and joint venture of any company following Ind AS should also follow Ind AS. Only that particular scenario you have to be little careful. Other than that, I don't think anything has to be worried about it. This is from my side. I think there is one question which has come in the chat box. I will just pick it up. Okay. Yalaya is asking the question, can you explain the requirement of AS4 considering the COVID-19 situation? AS4 is actually talking about events occurring after the balance sheet date, before it is signed. Very simple. So for example, we normally do an audit of a small and medium enterprise or small and medium companies in September, because up to September companies can have the AGM. So first week of September our accounts adoption will happen. Last week of September they will have the AGM. That's the way in which majority of our client work will be get completed. So the question comes is, AS4 is talking about if there are any events which is occurring between March 31st and before the sign of the balance sheet or before the financial statements are adopted. If there are some events which has happened and that has a bearing on the financial statement as of 31st March, you are supposed to adjust them in 31st March itself. So in the case of a non-corporate entity, or in the case of a small and medium company, suppose COVID-19 has an impact, whether that is an adjusting event or non-adjusting event. The 7 days is not non-adjusting event, okay? Sorry, the 7 days is not events occurring after the balance sheet date. That has happened within the year, 24th to 31st. But subsequent to that, I'm seeing that on 24th, I have certain inventory. That inventory is saleable on 31st March, but subsequent to the year end, because 3 months there is a lockdown, it is not fully lifted, logistics are not available, these items could not be sold. Because it is not saleable in the market, the selling price will be only scrap. So that scrap value will be the net realizable value of the inventory. The question is whether inventory can still be valued at the price at which 31st March prices will come into picture, or I should consider the scrap value because of COVID-19 situation. The answer is this subsequent information gives an indication of the value of the inventory as of 31st March. So it is considered as an adjusting event. Similarly, a debtor which is outstanding, you are not able to collect it because the debtor has gone bankrupt because of COVID-19 situation, or the exports which you have made to a country where COVID is still having a problem, you are not able to collect that. Then whether to provide the bad debts in 31st March 2020 or 31st March 2021, the answer is it is an indicator of the position of the assets as on 31st March 2020. So it's an adjusting event. So you have to make a provision in 20 March itself. This is what AS4 is concerned. Another question which is coming in is, can non-corporate entities present financials in Ind AS? Are there any restriction? So actually there is no restriction. If you wanted to do it, you can do it. But only problem is, the moment you are started following Ind AS, you cannot come back. That is what the roadmap which is being mentioned. And to that extent, I believe that not to invite trouble. That is what my personal feeling. I never saw any non-corporate entities preparing Ind AS. Even application of AS they are little worried for non-corporate. Why should we do that? We have considered all the questions of all the participants. If there are any other questions, I will please post it in the chat box. I will answer them. If there are no other questions, I will give it to the moderator of the session. Any other question I can take from the participants? Okay. If any individual is having more than one closely held company is having substantial turnover, whether consolidation is required? Good question, sir. Because when we are talking about individual, we are talking about a non-corporate entity. Whether for a non-corporate entity, consolidation is mandatory is a question mark. If you see AS 21, 23 and 27, three standards which is talking about consolidation, that says if the entity prepares a consolidated financial statement, you have to apply all the standards. That means that the three standard itself is applicable only if consolidated financial statements are prepared. Now the question before us is that whether mandatorily consolidation is required for non-corporate entities for the individual, even though the individual has invested in three different entities, absolutely no consolidated financial statement is required to be prepared by the individual, because in his financial statement, it is only an investment made in the other entity, and accordingly nothing to worry about preparing a consolidated, because it is not mandatory. In respect of companies, it becomes mandatory because another provision of the Companies Act, section 129, subsection 3 says, if an entity has one associate, even one associate, it should also prepare a consolidated financial statement and present before the shareholders for approval. And in that section, it also says, for the purposes of this section, the word subsidiary includes associate and joint venture. So that means under the Companies Act, even a small and medium enterprises has investment in another entity as an associate, more than 20%. It should prepare consolidated on a mandatory basis under section 129, subsection 3. Whereas when it comes to non-corporate entities, there is no such legal provision which made mandatory. But if you wanted to prepare a consolidated financial statement for an individual, then you have to comply with the provision. It is a discretionary, not made mandatory. Any other questions, sir? Okay. So in case if you are having any other question, you can always get in touch with me. And my sincere thanks to the three chairmen and the office bearers of Anantapur, Kurnool and Kadapa branches for this excellent opportunity. In fact, I have seen that 3 branches, but all 3 branches are very actively involved by seeing the number of people who have participated in that. And I must thank all of you for doing this. And my sincere thanks for Naresh Delhi sir, who has actually introduced the people. And I am handing it over to the organizers for the closing remark. And thank you so much for your patience here.
Okay.
One more question is coming. 2 companies having common shareholder, can they said to be associated? Just because they are common shareholders, associated enterprise will not come, sir.
Ganesh, speaker, for your brilliant, informative, contentful, and lucid presentation on accounting standards in such a way that your speech is enriching all the practitioners in this area about application of accounting standards to corporate as well as non-corporate entities. We have very well described the fine line between an entity for which accounting standards are applicable and an entity for which accounting standards are not applicable. So that much of clarity you have brought with your speech, sir. You also covered income tax matters together with application of accounting standards, where a distinction has to be made. You have explained very well, sir. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation, and we expect to see you in more webinars in future, sir. Thank you. Now, over to C.S. Mukesh, Secretary of Kurnool branch of SIRC, for vote of thanks.
Chief guest of today's virtual CPE meeting, CA D. Prasanna Kumar sir, Central Council member of ICI. Is my voice audible, sir? Hello. CA D. Prasanna Kumar sir, Central Council member of ICI, for briefing or sharing us on the recent developments at ICI, like benefits to the members during this COVID-19 pandemic time, like loans available to members, software tools, insurance, etc., which support the members at large, and MEF issues, cooling period in bank audits, and other issues. We thank you, sir, for clarifying the doubts and support extended by you in organizing the virtual CPE meeting of today. We thank CA G. Naresh Gelli, sir, ex officio member of Kadapa branch and regional council member of SIRC of ICI, and CA R. Chengal Reddy, sir, ex officio member of Kurnool and Anantapur branch and regional council member of SIRC of ICI, for their efforts and support in uniting the three branches for conducting the virtual CPE meeting of today. We also expect the same support from you, sir, in conducting more virtual CPEs like this, sir. Thank you, sir. We thank the eminent speaker of today's virtual CPE meeting, Mr. C.A. Chinnaswamy Ganeshan, sir, for enriching and enlightening us on accounting standards for small and medium enterprises, and also dealing in issues like definition of accounting standards, regulatory framework applicability of accounting standards, checklist approach on accounting standards, audit report considerations, and many other issues. Sir, we thank you for sharing your vast knowledge and clarifying our doubts on accounting standards, sir. Thank you, sir. And we thank the chairman of three branches, N. Srinivas Gupta, sir, chairman of Kurnool branch, R.J. Venkataswamy, sir, chairman of Anantapur branch, Kota Janardhan Rao, sir, chairman of Kadapa branch, for uniting and jointly conducting this virtual CPE meeting with nearly not less than 85 participants were almost live during the CPE meeting, sir. And we thank the members of the three branches for their active participation in today's meeting and making this meeting a grand success, and also expect the same support from the members in the upcoming events. Finally, we thank the managers, staff, and technical team for their support in making this meeting a grand success. Thank you all. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, one and all, sir. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, sir. Bye. Thank you.